Kentucky has a minimally regulated late fee framework, consistent with the state's overall moderate approach to landlord-tenant regulation. The governing law is found in the Kentucky Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, Kentucky Revised Statutes, Chapter 383, along with general contract principles. If you're a landlord or tenant in Kentucky, the state provides basic landlord-tenant structure through the URLTA, but leaves most late fee details to the lease agreement. Let's start with the basics. Kentucky does not impose a specific statutory dollar cap or percentage cap on late fees. There is no statute that limits the fee to a certain amount or percentage of rent. The fee is governed by the lease terms and general contract principles, specifically the requirement that the fee be reasonable and not function as an unenforceable penalty. Kentucky does not mandate a grace period by statute. There is no state law requiring a specific number of days before a late fee can be charged. If your lease says rent is due on the 1st and a late fee applies on the 2nd, that's enforceable under Kentucky law. However, standard practice among Kentucky landlords is to include a grace period of 3 to 5 days, and most professional property managers use 5 days as the default. The key legal principle is reasonableness under Kentucky contract law. A late fee is a liquidated damages provision, and Kentucky courts apply the standard two-part analysis. The damages from late payment must be difficult to calculate precisely at the time the lease is signed, and the fee must be a reasonable pre-estimate of those anticipated damages. A fee that is grossly disproportionate to the landlord's actual costs is an unenforceable penalty. Kentucky courts have addressed liquidated damages provisions in various contract contexts, and the same principles apply to residential late fees. The fee must compensate the landlord for genuine costs: administrative time, additional accounting, follow-up communication, bank fees, and the time value of money. A fee that bears no reasonable relationship to these costs functions as a penalty and is unenforceable. What's reasonable in Kentucky? The state has a moderate to affordable rental market. Rents in Louisville typically range from $800 to $1,500. Lexington is similar. Smaller communities are more affordable. A flat fee of $25 to $60 or a percentage-based fee of 5 to 10% of the monthly rent is generally defensible. A $50 fee on a $1,000 Louisville rent is 5%, well within the reasonable range. A $150 fee on the same rent is 15%, vulnerable to challenge. Kentucky's URLTA includes a provision regarding unconscionable lease terms. Under KRS 383.545, a court may refuse to enforce a lease provision that is unconscionable, meaning grossly unfair or one-sided. While a late fee in the typical 5 to 10% range is presumptively reasonable, a fee combined with aggressive compounding, acceleration of the entire lease balance, or other punitive provisions could be challenged as unconscionable. The lease must clearly state the late fee terms. The lease should specify the rent due date, any grace period, the exact fee amount or formula, when the fee triggers, whether additional charges apply for continued non-payment, and whether the fee is defined as additional rent. Kentucky courts expect clear written agreement. Oral arrangements about late fees are insufficient. Compounding late fees in Kentucky must satisfy the reasonableness standard. A single one-time fee after the grace period is the simplest and most defensible approach. If your lease includes daily or weekly charges, the total must remain reasonable. A compounding structure that could generate fees exceeding 15 to 20% of the monthly rent within a few weeks would likely be struck down. Most Kentucky landlords use a single flat fee. The interaction between late fees and the eviction process in Kentucky is governed by the URLTA. Under KRS 383.660, the landlord must provide a 7-day notice for non-payment of rent. If the tenant fails to pay within 7 days, the landlord can file for eviction through the district court. Whether unpaid late fees can be included in the 7-day notice depends on how the lease defines them. If the lease defines late fees as additional rent, they can be included in the total amount demanded. If treated as a separate charge, the landlord may need to pursue them independently. Best practice: define late fees as additional rent. The 7-day notice gives the tenant an opportunity to cure. If the tenant pays the full amount owed within 7 days, including compliant late fees, the eviction stops. The cure amount must be accurately calculated. An inflated demand that includes excessive fees gives the tenant grounds to challenge the notice. It's important to note that the URLTA does not apply uniformly across all of Kentucky. The Act applies in counties containing a city of the first class, Louisville, and other counties that have adopted it by local action. In counties where the URLTA has not been adopted, the landlord-tenant relationship is governed by common law and the lease terms, which may provide even less regulation of late fees. However, the general contract law reasonableness standard applies everywhere in Kentucky, regardless of whether the URLTA has been adopted. This dual system means that a Kentucky landlord's specific legal obligations can vary depending on which county the property is in. A landlord in Louisville operates under the full URLTA framework. A landlord in a rural county that hasn't adopted the URLTA operates under common law and lease terms. Either way, the reasonableness standard applies to late fees, but the procedural requirements for eviction and other remedies may differ. Kentucky limits the security deposit to 1 month's rent under the URLTA. The deposit must be held in a separate account at a financial institution in Kentucky. The landlord must provide the tenant with the name and address of the depository. The deposit must be returned within 30 days, or within 60 days if there are deductions. The landlord must provide an itemized list of deductions. Unpaid late fees can be deducted if the lease authorizes it and the fees are reasonable. For tenants receiving Housing Choice Voucher Assistance, common in Louisville, Lexington, and other Kentucky cities, landlords should not charge late fees when the housing authority's portion is delayed due to processing. The tenant cannot control the authority's payment timeline. If the tenant's portion is paid on time, the fee should apply only when the tenant's own payment is actually late. Kentucky's military population is significant, centered around Fort Knox and Fort Campbell. Fort Knox, home to the Army's Human Resources Command, the Army Cadet Command, and the United States Bullion Depository, generates military and civilian rental demand in the Radcliffe, Elizabethtown, and Vine Grove corridor. Fort Campbell straddles the Kentucky-Tennessee border near Hopkinsville, home of the 101st Airborne Division and one of the largest military installations in the country. Military pay is predictable, and most military tenants pay reliably. Fort Campbell's deployment-heavy mission means that military families may experience temporary financial disruptions during deployments, particularly if the deploying service member handled household finances. Some Hopkinsville and Clarksville landlords proactively reach out to military families at deployment to confirm payment arrangements. Fort Knox's transition from an active combat training post to primarily a human resources and administrative command has changed the local rental dynamic. The population is more stable with less frequent PCS rotation than in previous decades. From a practical standpoint, Kentucky's rental market has 2 major metros and several secondary markets. Louisville is the state's largest city and primary rental market. The economy is driven by healthcare, including Norton Healthcare and U of L Health. Logistics. UPS Worldport at Louisville International Airport is the largest automated package sorting facility in the world. Manufacturing, bourbon industry, and education. Rents in desirable Louisville neighborhoods, the Highlands, New Lou, Germantown, Crescent Hill, commonly range from $1,000 to $1,600. Most Louisville landlords charge flat fees of $35 to $65 with a 5-day grace period. The professional tenant base, drawn from healthcare, logistics, and corporate employment, generally pays on time. Late fee enforcement is standard, but limited to a small percentage of tenants. The UPS Worldport operation at Louisville's airport employs thousands of workers, many on shift schedules with bi-weekly pay. Some UPS workers' pay dates may not align with the first of the month. Landlords with significant UPS employee tenant populations may want to offer flexible due dates. Lexington, home to the University of Kentucky, has a market driven by the university, healthcare, including UK healthcare, the thoroughbred horse industry, and Toyota's manufacturing presence in nearby Georgetown. Student tenants near UK may experience late payments at the beginning of each semester when financial aid processes. Bowling Green, home to Western Kentucky University and a major Corvette manufacturing plant, has a moderate market. Owensboro, Covington, Florence, and the northern Kentucky communities adjacent to Cincinnati have markets influenced by the Cincinnati metro economy. Frankfort, the state capital, has a small, stable market driven by state government. Paducah, Richmond, Murray, and smaller Kentucky communities have affordable markets with limited demand. The eastern Kentucky coalfield region has some of the most economically distressed communities in the country. Population decline, limited economic opportunity, and very low incomes characterize this region. Landlords in eastern Kentucky should set late fees that reflect the local economic reality. A fee appropriate for Louisville's professional market is unrealistic in a community where many residents live on disability or Social Security. One best practice for Kentucky landlords: determine whether your county has adopted the URLTA. If it has, the full statutory framework applies, including specific notice requirements for eviction. If not, common law governs, which gives you more flexibility but also less procedural guidance. Either way, the reasonableness standard for late fees applies. Another best practice: set your late fee at a level that's meaningful but defensible. In Louisville and Lexington, where rents range from $800 to $1,600, a fee of $40 to $70 is the sweet spot. In more affordable markets, $25 to $40 is appropriate. A percentage-based fee of 5 to 8% automatically scales to the local rent level. A third best practice: apply your late fee consistently across all tenants. Kentucky's diverse tenant population, including professionals, military families, students, manufacturing workers, and lower-income residents, spans every demographic. Selective enforcement creates fair housing risk. Document every late payment, every fee charged, and every communication. Consistent records protect you in any dispute, whether in district court under the URLTA or in a common law jurisdiction. For the complete guide to Kentucky late fee laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our late fee law series.